So it's the metaphor I give in the book, is that captains build the ship so they're best suited to dictate its course because they actually know how the ship works. You wouldn't ask a passenger who just showed up to man the helm, as it were. And that rubs some folks the wrong way, especially in the Bay Area, which is there's a lot of left-leaning thought that runs counter to that relationships should be in all respects egalitarian and exactly equal. And I found that when I've tried to do that in the past, it led to poor outcomes. And now it's like this kind of doesn't work for everyone, but it's also useful because like women can self-select in and out. Like they
That's
also
right.
more or less know what works for them and what they want. And trust me, there's a lot of women who don't want to be the person running the show. Here's an example. We talked about a few minutes ago differences in gendered perception of just around the role of, let's say, respect and equality. So one of the things that I would do, if we were going to make plans, David, as a sign of respect, I would kind of like defer judgment to you. It's like, well, where do you want to go, David? Like, what kind of food do you want to eat? Because I'd want to, that's a sign of respect. I'm taking your interests and tastes into account. But unfortunately, I think that when you do that in a dating context, a lot of women see that as wishy-washy, as unmasculine, as weak, for lack of a better word. What I've discovered just in this
Well,
very
it
small...
is weak because you're on some level you're trying to please them, and they can feel that, like you want to be good for them. Like, what do you want? Like that, it's that energy that I think is repulsive to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be polite, but very often it's what you said. Like men defer to women, or they want to be liked by them, and they give away their power, and it leaves women with a feeling of they don't respect it.
Well, yeah, I've had much better success just saying, hey, I want to go, let's go out on this day at this time to this place, meet me here. And, they either say yes or say no. But that's in one very small way how being more directive and dominant with women can lead to better outcomes in dating and relationships. The same thing, there's an element of deference in respect that can be misinterpreted in intersexual dynamics. Another big thing I've talked about on the channel is that respect is asexual. Like from
Say
a masculine, well, think about all of the ceremonies that are really based on respect, like an award ceremony or a funeral. It's like sexualizing the object of honor would be completely disgusting and inappropriate. It's like the person who is being respected, we strip all sexualization away from that person. They're at odds with each other. And so I think we have a generation, or maybe a couple generations of men who have been told to respect women. And one of the consequences of that is they've more or less stripped all of their communication from any kind of any sexual interest or desire. Because you don't desire and respect simultaneously. Maybe you can vacillate between the two of them in some strange compromise, but I think if you want to, you would not feel respected if you were sexualized as a consequence of that honoring. If you were, then we're doing honor wrong in our ceremonies. We should be sexualizing the recipients of that respect. And I think men, when they're dealing with women in the sexual marketplace and in dating, they inadvertently and inappropriately remove their sexual desire and interest as if it's something to be ashamed of, something that's at odds with respect, which is ultimately what women want. And I think that leads to poorer outcomes. Of course, these men haven't ceased desiring women sexually, but which creates this sort of like weird deceptiveness and hypocrisy around dating that can feel creepy, which is sort of like the nice guy paradox.
Yeah, I don't think women want to be respected. They to enough of a degree, they want to be. They preference desire over respect. They want to feel that a man desires them.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a tough sell. to say women don't want to be respected. David
Well,
Sutcliffe, right?
I mean, it's kind of what you just said, though. Like, don't respect women. Like, I was hearing the woman in the comments, like, so what are you saying, Orion? I shouldn't mention respect women, but it's not what you're saying. This is a very nuanced thing, but but my experience, yeah, of course, respect, but it's not the kind of respect that you afford to a man. Or a certain situation. It's a different thing. It's simply because women are so. Well, one, we're attracted to them and there's a sexual component to them. So that throws everything off in terms of how you relate to them. And that the energy of sexuality and desire, it overpowers everything. I mean, it really is the strongest force out there. So it's almost like you have the desire is a kind of respect if it's coming from a place that is respectful, something like that.
I hear that. Like some women can feel disrespected if the men that they are attracted to don't try to sleep with them.
That's right.
They feel it's like, what are you, gay? Like you don't like what you see here?
I had that. It's like, why are you trying to get in my pants? I was like, I'm trying to be. I didn't. They were upset because I was being good, and then I got over that.
Michael Sartain talks about how in his conceptualization, there's actually like 3 genders. There are women, and there are low status men and high status men.
Yeah.
And they're almost like 2 different creatures. And the issue is that women want to be desired by the men they want desire from. And they really don't want desire from the men they don't want desire from. But it's impossible in most cases for the man to know in which camp he finds himself until he shoots his shot.
Well, what do we do about that? Because if we just leave it to the dynamics, won't we be a polygamous society? Like, is this idea of enforced monogamy that you've heard Jordan Peterson reference? Like, it does make sense to me because otherwise you have this group of young men filled with testosterone. Although I guess if they're jerking off to porn all the time, that goes down. They're kind of subdued in some way. But that's a dangerous precedent for a society to have a bunch of young disaffected men eventually that they're going to get together and probably create a lot of problems. So like, what do we do with low status men?
Yeah, that's the theory, is that if there's too many young men in particular who don't have access to women, they'll band together and become like
ISIS.
It's kind of like they'll channel their sexual frustration into, let's say, societal antisocial tendencies.
Well, dude, if I was 21 and I wasn't getting laid and there was no possibility for me getting laid, I would like join a gang and start fucking shit up. What else am I going to do?
Well, you would watch porn and smoke weed.
Well, there's that.
Which is generally what happens. Like gangs still exist, but there's far more young men watching porn and smoking weed than they're joining the Crips or whatever it is, you know? So that's actually a bigger social neutralizer. And the fact of the matter is that we've reached this point in our society where we don't need everyone to be productive in order for society to be functioning. And that's dangerous from the perspective of like, we're all collectively falling short of our social and civic potential in that way. But that's where we've reached. It's kind of a decadence that often precedes collapse, and then the values and the systems get recalibrated. But I'm not concerned about sexless men joining together into violent gangs. There's too many other seductive anesthesias that will capture them before antisocial violence.
It feels sad to me. I prefer the antisocial violence. There's something about a group of men subdued on porn and weed that just feels anti-life. But that is what it is. What do we do about that? What is there something to do, or is this just what's happening? And as you said, it precedes collapse, and this is where we're at, and it'll remake itself in some way after the collapse.
Yeah, I think the game never ends. It just keeps changing and transforming over time. I certainly don't feel like there's grounds to become nihilistic or overly pessimistic about the future. It's like some things will fall apart, other things will remain, and we'll have a new synthesis moving forward. And that's never going to stop. What do we do about it? I mean, I don't know if or to what extent the solution can be social.
Mm.
I think that it comes from, I think that the young men that have been ensnared in certain ways, they need an installation of hope, and they need help. And I don't just mean they need therapy. They need people who are invested in their lives and invested in their success to walk with them as they build a life worth living.
Mm.
And hope is a very dangerous thing. And I learned about this because my pre-doc internship for 2 years was at the Cancer Support Community in Walnut Creek, California, which is a fascinating organization. It's a nonprofit. All the services are completely free of charge. And for a couple of years, I was doing individual and group therapy with cancer patients and their caregivers. And hope is a really tricky thing. Like, we need it way more than we typically admit. But there comes a time where hope it's causing more pain than good.
Because it creates a false expectation. Sets them up for disappointment.
I mean, yeah, most people who pass away from cancer, they typically don't die right away. You know, they get diagnosed. Sometimes they get diagnosed too late, and then they do chemo. Okay, and maybe that causes a remission for a year or two, and then the cancer comes back, and now they do radiation or more intensive surgeries if that's possible, and that leads to a remission for a certain amount of time. The point is that, like, you keep doing things because you have a hope that you can eventually kill a disease and live cancer-free for the rest of your days. And there comes a point where the likelihood of that occurring is just very, very low, if not non-existent. But it's not something that I found you can disabuse other people of. Like, people have to come to their own decision in their own time to kill the hope. And this is like the black pill movement that people have been talking about a lot in the last few years, where you just have these hopeless men that they will never have a satisfying relationship with a woman. Their lives will never amount to anything. To my mind, I mean, I can understand that. Like, I felt so hopeless when I was a young man, but that was a lie. That was a lie. And it's a very easy lie to see through because, like, when have you fucking tried? Like,
Yeah.
like, you can give up when you've tried everything. Then it's the important thing that, to potentially let go and to pass on with some sort of dignity and acceptance. But if you've tried one or two things and it hasn't worked, it's like it's too early to lay down and die, in my opinion. So I think that people need hope, but hope is a painful thing. I think a lot of these young men are trying to make themselves believe that it's hopeless because it
Right.
might be more comfortable to completely kill the hope.
Well, if
Because
they're hopeless, there's no responsibility. They don't have to take responsibility for their lives ultimately and do the hard work of making something of themselves.
it is very hard work. I talk about that on the channel and in the book. Being a young man is really hard. It's really tough. That's why they're the cannon fodder. Like, no one cries that an 18-year-old man has been killed. They're expendable.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I felt that as a young man, when I was being told that it's a man's world and men run the world and women are not equal. I was like, that's not how it feels to me. That's not my experience of it. And I grew up in a home where my mother was pretty dominant and my grandmother was pretty dominant. So it was more matriarchal. So that I had that image. But in terms of power, and I think you allude to this in your book, or where you say it directly, that in general, women actually have more power than men. I mean, on the simplest level, it's women and children first. It's like, when it comes down to it, you live, I die. So in that sense, they ultimately do have more power. And in that sense, I guess they should.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, like, I like my life. I don't. I mean, from
But
a like from
but you know that you have to lay it down for your woman if it comes to that. I mean, you don't have to, but most of us would, or we'd think that that was the right thing. And if you didn't do that, you'd be criticized, judged, you'd be a social pariah generally. Or is that changing?
certain. Oh no, you would certainly be judged, and probably the guilt associated with not doing it if you were to survive and the woman didn't would eat you up inside. But I question. I think the argument is made that that's sort of like a biological imperative in males to protect, and that might be true. But I wonder to what extent it's also like fucking brainwashing. It's like kamikaze pilots. And it's like you serve the social order by making a sacrifice of your life. And it's like, fuck that. Like, I want more for my life than simply being a sacrifice, potentially for the good of others, including women and children. Like, I actually want more for my life than that. And that is dangerous because it's useful to have a subclass of men who are already primed up to be useful sacrifices.
And so I guess what you're implying is that there's a structure there. There's a brainwashing that people want to keep in place because it serves them.
I mean, if we're really going into sexual egalitarianism, it's like we can't use gender as the sine qua non to decide who lives and who dies in certain situations. Like, do we do a utilitarian analysis? Now we're getting into like the trolley car problem. It's like, some men, they might do more good to more people than, a woman and a child. Who knows? But it's like
true. We on the Titanic, we should have lined everybody up and see who was most necessary. And there's a couple of, maybe a number of women that would have had to get in the water. Who knows?
And I'm glad I'm not in a position to judge. But my point is that I do think that, I mean, can we even look at that critically? Or does it feel too transgressive to even consider that men should not just reflexively be the sacrifice, to be the one who lays down their lives?
Yeah, I agree with that.